Hey, welcome class. Today's class we're going to talk about filter, transform, and transition. These are all some different properties that we can do on uh, images or really any element, and we can cause change in these elements, typically done via the hover effect. Let's dive into it here. We're going to start with filter. So filter is going to be some image manipulation that you can do, and you can do things like change the colors, add a shadow, make it grayscale or sepia, or change the saturation and whatnot. I have a link here. The CSS tricks page is pretty nice. It's going to give you some explanation in there. And we're going to have this nice ukulele, and it kind of goes through each one of these separately. Which is pretty nice. You can see saturation here. You can rotate the hue, which is pretty nice. Invert for photographs or whatnot. Opacity, which we do have another way of changing opacity. This is specifically with regard to images right here. Well, maybe it's not. Correct me if that's not right. This is not specifically with regard to images. We can change the brightness, contrast. You can blur an image. Pretty nice. You can do a drop shadow. In this example here, there's this drop shadow. There is a way to do a drop shadow that follows the image. You do have to have a transparent image to begin with. I don't go over this in my example though. So that's all the individual ones on CSS tricks. Here I've got the developer page from Mozilla that kind of goes over the syntax of each one. And those are pretty much all the, there's pretty simple stuff there. We're just changing some images. It's not rocket surgery, right? They are pretty cool. Each one does its own thing. If you want to do more than one on an item, you do the command filter. Oops. And you put the 1 in here. So in this example, I have blur 5 pixels and grayscale 50%. You just put them all on one line. You don't comma separate them. Right? Not in this case, you don't. Just put them in one line. And you can have as many as you want to put in there. You can even do the same ones over again. And so if I were to do grayscale 50% and then grayscale 50% again, it would add up to each other. Don't quote me whether it's additive or multiplicative. You'll have to test that out and see. It's kind of not the most useful thing to do grayscale multiple times anyway. But you can, it's not going to break anything. You'll just, you'll get either the last one or some combination, whatever you're going to get. But you can't do that, so you don't have to worry about it breaking things anyway. You can just run it. You can put all these on there. I do have a fiddle with an example in here, and I'm going to use the same image as well. I have actually a bunch of effects going on at once in my example, so I'm going to jump ahead to these next ones first. Go to transform and also transition before we take a deeper dive into my example. So filters are for kind of generic or general image manipulation, color and tone and that kind of thing. Transform, we're actually going to be able to scale things and skew things and rotate things. So in here I have a link down at the bottom to the Mozilla developer page, so you can see how these work. There's even a matrix one, which you're going to have to play around with exactly how that one works. I don't use it too much. And it's going to take quite a while to really get the hang of everything you can do in that one. You can get some kind of 3D effects in here a little bit as well. But translate is essentially move. Scale is it has an X and a Y value. Additionally, you can do the scale X and scale Y like I have here. So you can do it as one, or separate them out, or put them in here as an XY coordinate kind of deal, whichever you prefer. Rotate is going to do a rotation if it has a time delay or on a hover effect. It's actually going to take some time to do that rotation. It's not going to be instantaneous, which we will get to in my example. My example does do that, so it does the rotation over a full second, and you can watch it rotate for that full second. Skew is going to, in the X value, it's going to skew this way or this way. And in the Y value, it's going to skew this way or this way. Okay? And then this little example right here has that. And then you can double these up the same way we did with filters. We don't comma separate them, we just put them in order. And a nice thing that you can also do in transform is you can, what my example is going to do, it's going to rotate an image, translate it along that rotation, and then rotate it back so it's square again. And when you do the rotate and the rotate in the same line, at one, let's say we did 30 degrees on the first one, and then we translated it, and then we rotated negative 30 degrees to fix it, the object is never going to rotate visibly. It's just going to follow that path. So that's a pretty useful way to have the same thing in there twice as you're building up these transforms. Okay, and then last of the three kind of big things on here is transition, which transition has a 4 other properties built into it. You can do the shorthand as I have here at the top, or you can pull them out individually. If you go to the transition property link that I have and you scroll down to which one am I at now? Oh, sorry, go back. If you scroll down here, you can click each individual part of the transition and see how each of them works. So first, the property is which property is going to transition. You can do a single property like height or width or background, or you can do multiple properties. This time you are going to have a comma separated list, or you can use the keyword all so that all properties transition, or if you're trying to disable a transition, you can do the keyword of none. So the next is the duration, which how long this transition is going to take. So in my example, I'm doing 1 second, and durations are done in milliseconds, so it's 1000 ms. And then the timing function, I believe I am just using ease, which is kind of the generic timing function. We can look at some timing functions down here. You can custom define your own timing function. So there's ease in, ease out. Ease is the generic one, but you can have things start very quickly and then slow down, or you can have them start slowly and then go fast at the end. You can, there's some pre-built ones, or you can custom define your own. You can do these steps as well, like this example is, it's kind of doing it all choppy like that. And you can define your own through the timing function. I rarely ever define my own. I just use mostly ease or ease in, ease out, which are kind of standard. The standard ones are standard, and so they're being used a lot, and whichever one people see most often is probably going to be what they're most comfortable with. And so that's why I tend to use it. If they're comfortable with it, they're going to think it looks right, and then I'm going to use the one that my clients think is the right one. So now we got these 3 ones, kind of talked about what they are. Let's have a look at them in action. Right? So I have 2 examples. I have this top one and this bottom one here. So the first one I put inside a div with a class called spinning. It's going to spin, as you kind of just saw there. Right? And then I have my image. And then I put a paragraph above and below each one so you can kind of see what happens to the stuff around it. And then the bottom one, I have one called star, and there's 5 images in there. We'll wait and see that one. Right? Maybe you can guess what it's going to do. Right? So let's have a look at the CSS. So I have just a little body CSS to center things, and to give me the border blocks that I like to have, a little style on the paragraphs to give them just a little bit of spacing, so they're not right on top of everything. And then let's get right into the spinning one. So object in class spinning, that is an image. I have an automatic height with a width of 300, so that's going to keep my image proportions correct. Margin 0 auto, that's going to center things. If the body text line center hadn't already done it, this is going to definitely do it for me. A 1 EM border radius, which just kind of softens the edges right there, about 1 EM, 1 line height essentially. And then this is where my transition comes in at first, and we'll have to have a look at, say I have my hover effect down below, and there's also a transition in there. So I can never remember which one is which, so I have to play with them first every time. So I set one to 500 milliseconds and one to 1,000 milliseconds. So that's a half a second and a second. And the thing that I can never always remember is one of them will happen when you hover, and then one of them will happen when you unhover. Okay. So you'll want to play with these. Maybe you can remember it. I can never do, because it's kind of it's a 50-50 thing. Those are always troublesome, and it's one or the other. But it's not that hard to figure out. You just test it out, put 2 different times in there, and then watch what happens. You can figure it out easily with a quick test like that. So the first one I have doing all half a second, 500 milliseconds. Ease is my transition, and I have no delay. It's going to happen instantly when you hover. I'm not putting a delay in this example. That would be it would kind of defeat. I just didn't put a delay. You can put delays in there however you like. They're used a little bit less often because obviously people want things to happen as soon as they think it's going to happen, and not with any kind of delay. But certainly that's not always the case, and so there is a delay option in there if you want to do it. Right, so that's the first one that's on there, is transition, and that means that all this other stuff is going to happen once we hover, and then it's going to unhappen the reverse when we unhover. So if I try and guess, the way that I have this is the transition on inside the hover of 1 second is going to happen when you hover. It's going to take 1 second to do its thing. And then the unhover is going to quickly go back to the way it was in half a second. I think that's the way I programmed it. Makes sense. Let's see if I'm right. So my first effect that's going to happen in here is I have a filter with a hue rotate of 150 degrees and then a saturate of 150%. So hue rotate, you ever seen that line of color starts at red on one side and goes all the way to blue, purple on the other side, and has yellow and green and everything in the middle? So hue rotate is going to move along that scale. Imagine if that scale was 360 degrees long, and wherever you're at, if I were to move you 360 degrees, you'd go around and come back again, and you'd be in the exact same spot over again. So if I moved you 180 degrees, you'd be the opposite color of what you started. So I'm moving 150 degrees. I played around with the numbers, and I just figured that 150 degrees gives me a cool light blue guitar, ukulele. And then saturate by 150%. So this is the color saturation. It's going to make my color 150% saturated. So it's 50% more than normal. Saturation of 100% is no change, should be no change. So 50% more color than it had previously. So the first one is going to rotate to a light blue ukulele, and then the second filter is going to make that light blue brighter. And it is going to happen along that 1,000 milliseconds. It's a little hard to see that kind of happens. A little hard to notice. It's definitely not a snap when it happens, but because of all the things that are going on at the same time, I'm rotating and scaling and skewing here below, which we haven't got to just yet. But because all that stuff is going on all at once, it is a little bit hard for all of this to be seen, and we'll play around with it a little bit and change it up. So moving down to the transform, I have the first one is it's going to rotate 1080 degrees or 3.5 or 4 flips. 4 flips? It does come out facing the right way in the end. 1080, it's a snowboarding thing. Yeah, skateboarding. And then it's going to scale 2 times in the X, 2 times in the Y. So it's going to be twice as big this way, twice as big this way. And then it's going to skew by 0 degrees in the X, so it's not going to do anything this way. And then negative 10 degrees in the Y. So you can do positive and negative. It's just a matter of, do you want it to go this way or do you want to go this way? And again, 50-50, you're just going to have to play with the numbers and do it. If you're doing all the skews every day, all the time, you'll probably get this memorized, but I don't memorize it. I just play with the numbers and figure out which one I like. So I just picked negative 10 because I thought it skewed it in just the right angle, so it looked cool. That's it. Nothing more of that. And then last I have this border radius, which I think I talked about before. The first border radius I have normally, which you can see, is 1 EM, so 1 line height, border radius, and then 999 pixel border radius, which on a sufficiently old browser is going to bork everything. But on newer browsers, if you give a border radius just one number, and it's way larger than everything else, it's going to be a perfect pill-shaped border radius. So flat, for a rectangle, it would be flat top and the bottom, and a perfect radius on either side. Really great that browsers started doing something like that, because without it, it was actually pretty hard to always get the perfect shape, no matter whether it's big or small or whatnot. So this works out pretty well. And now we've gone over each one, so let's have a look at what it's going to do. So I hover over there, and it did all those things all at once, all inside of 1 second. And then if I unhover, it goes all the way back. So it rotates back the other way, and then in half the time. Okay, so we'll do that a couple of times. Pretty fun. And I got a nice skew in there and everything. Okay. So let's move this around a little bit. Okay, and we'll play around with these. We'll comment out both of these, filter and the transform, excuse me. All right, we'll rerun this, and then we'll see just that cool border radius. Okay, so just that. It goes perfectly. Very nice. Okay, and now I'll rewrite in there just an individual filter and just a transform. Let's do, let me just copy and paste this and then delete one of them. Right, I'll start with the hue rotate first. Right, so hue rotate 150 degrees. So if it's a color wheel or a color line, which I see more often as the line, the hue rotate is going to rotate you either around the wheel or along that line. The line is basically just the perimeter of the wheel anyway. I think it is. All right, so run that, and then when I hover, all right, let me get this border radius out of here as well, because it's kind of drawing my eye. I want to see one thing at a time. So filter, hue rotate, 1 second on, half a second off. Right. So we can see that rotation, that hue rotation really happening. It takes the whole time, right? And we got the ease as well on both of them. Right. So let's change this to ease in, and ease out on the alternate. So if we were to come in here, notice it's a little bit different now. Oh, I think I had a glitch. Hold on. All right, so ease in and ease out, which is probably perfect for the 1 second in and the half a second out. Should be ease in and ease out. So the transition going in kind of starts out very gradual and moves in pretty nice. And then on the out, moves out and then finishes up very nicely at the end. Probably pretty perfect there. So let's have, let's do the rotate and the saturate together. Got the border radius off again still, so I'm rotating and saturating, so it's kind of the same. I have that extra color. Let's see if I can really see what the saturate does by itself anyway. Yeah, barely. Depending on your monitor, you might not know anything. Let's bump this number up to 5 times saturation. Now you can see everything, right? Comes on. It starts off a little bit slow with the ease in, so we're easing into it, and it builds up. And then with the ease out is just the reverse, so it starts off and then. And let's put this hue rotate back in here. Let's see if we can do a 360-degree hue rotation and watch it and have it come right back to where we started. And we can. It's pretty long, or pretty quick, I mean. Let's make it a little shorter, or a little longer, a little slower, so we can actually see that rotation going all the way back to where we started. It's probably pretty far for a hue rotation to go. Maybe 180 is probably the maximum that you want to go that actually makes sense, because that's right about just past that 150 that I had in the beginning is where it seems like the color kind of takes a turn. Maybe that's why I pulled the 150 from the first time, but that's pretty good. I'll go back to my 1 second. Okay. Now that we got a hang of that, let's have a look at these transforms one at a time. I want to do I want to take the rotate off, and I want to take the skew off and do just the scale. I'm going to leave the color change in there because it's fun. So just larger and smaller, larger and smaller. And notice the transform is moving, it's changing its size, but these paragraphs, I have lorem ipsum in there, they don't move at all. It's not reshuffling everything in your browser. It's not changing all that stuff. It's just growing it. I actually have these. No, these are not positioned absolutely. The other ones are positioned absolutely because I'm doing something else with them. We'll get to those. But this one is positioned normally, not changed it at all. So it's static, position static. That's the default. No change there for neither the paragraphs above and below it or the image itself. Right? So the transform is taking that change out of flow with the rest of the page. The element itself before the change is in flow. It's normal. There's no change there. And then when the change happens, that's not affecting everything else around the page, which is very nice, because if that wasn't the case, then you couldn't really plan for this very well. You would have to put it inside of a container, position absolute it inside of that container, make sure the container is big enough to incorporate whatever changes there are, and it wouldn't really be nearly as useful. So much more useful this way. It covers up both the paragraph above it and the paragraph below it, so there's a z-index change in there somehow. I want to say that the transforms actually paint a new layer on top, so they'll be on top of everything. Don't quote me on that. It's definitely on top of this paragraph below it, though. Right, so that's pretty nice. Let's put the skew in here. Have a look at that without the scale. Right, so 0 degrees in the X skew and -10 in the Y skew. Right, run that change, and then there's the Y skew. So Y is this way, and X is this way. Okay, so pretty cool. Okay. And you can really see the ease on this one as well. Starts off slow, and then it finishes up fast on the ease in, and then reverse on the ease out. So real nice. All right, I guess let's put the rotate in there. Should I do a full 180 degrees? Nah. Let's just do 20-degree rotation. So that I'll get my skew and a rotation. So, oh, the rotation went the other way. So that's why I had negative on my skew. It looks like I had a little bit of a glitch in my browser there. So the rotations are all clockwise, which is reverse of math. That's going to be a problem for me to remember. That's why I couldn't remember and I had to actually do the test. I would recommend that you test whatever you're writing in here as well. Don't just write it and assume that you're correct. You may know what they say about people who assume. I'm not going to assume you know, because that would make me an assumer. Right, so I've got to reverse my rotation. I threw the scale in there too. So I'm going to rotate, scale it, skew it. Both the rotate and my skew are going to be in the same general direction. That's pretty cool. Okay. So that effect right there is kind of like, maybe it kind of looks like a playing card that's zooming in and turning a little bit. So pretty cool. So you can combine these things to make some fairly elaborate things in here. And then I'm going to do the reverse 20-degree rotate at the end. So rotate in the beginning, then scale and skew it, and rotate at the end. Let's have a see what happens. I know I mentioned that before, but we're not doing a translate this time. Okay. So you do the rotate in one direction and the same rotation back. Visibly, you get nothing. So if we were to add a translate to that, like I did in my example below, and I've not gotten to yet, you would see things move, but I could put the rotation in and then translate along that rotation and then visibly unrotate the object so that it doesn't look rotated, but its path is rotated. Okay, that's the important part. So I rotated it, given it a path along that rotation, and then unrotated it visibly so it doesn't look rotated. And that's what I've done in this next example. All right, now we've gone through all of this. So the next one is class star. So these ones are all position absolute because they're moving, they're doing something else. And I give it a little yellow background color. And anywhere that I hover in that yellow background color, very light yellow, I have 5 points of a star. Each one is going to have that same hue, rotate, and saturate that I had before. So I just copied and pasted it. That same 1,000 millisecond transition, so 1 second. And then each one is going to rotate 1/5 of a turn, translate 150 pixels, and then rotate 1/5 of a turn back. So 1/5 of a turn is 0.2. Right? 0.2 times 5 is 1. Right? So a little bit of math. Right? I'm not sure you were aware there was going to be math in this class, but there's a little. Okay? So let's have a look at this in action. Right? And there we go. Right? So you thought it was going to be a starburst. It's a spinning star. Right? Each object rotates more and more of a turn. So the last object is actually the one that doesn't rotate at all. So they rotate in, but it's still moved out into its spot. So the rotation and then the translate by 150 pixels, which is just a little bit more than the image is itself. So one of the things we could do in here is we could change the transition time for different things in here. So let me change on the I don't know if I can change the transition for a specific part of a transform. Let me try one. So all of them are going to be 1 second, but transition on rotate of 0 milliseconds. So I'm not sure. Kind of teaching on the fly. All right, so that one I pulled the entire transform, so that wasn't very fun. Right. That wasn't very fun. So I wasn't able to pull just one element of the transform, the three things we have in the transform. We have a rotate, a translate, and then a reverse rotate. I wasn't able to pull just one of those on there, which is unfortunate because that would have been pretty sweet. And then I could have actually gotten a starburst. Could have had the rotates happen instantly. Yeah, you might be able to do it with something else though, and that's okay. But in any case, this is the examples I have for you today. Both of these, right? I have a link on this first page to this JSFiddle, right? So I'm not using Dreamweaver today because Dreamweaver is not going to give you any more information than this. Anyway, you're going to have to put this CSS into your CSS file and then apply it. I'm applying it via a class name. All right, I would absolutely advise you to use a class name the same way. And I think this is new today. All right, the nth child. This is a pseudo class. So pseudo meaning false. It's not a real class, so it's not this kind of class. You don't define it as a class, so it's a pseudo class. And in this case, I have the real class of star, which is this item right here, this element, a div class star. It gets hovered. Whatever image is inside of it, that is the nth child, first child, second child, third child, fourth child, and fifth child. And you can do some math in there as well. So you can do the 2n, the 2n plus 1, that would be evens and odds. Right? So the 2n would be every second one, and then the 2n plus 1 would be every second one, but you plus 1, so you would actually start with the other ones. So that would actually skip the first one, I think. So you would want an extra line there to define exactly the first one. But those are the evens and odds. You can do 3n, so every third one. You do 3n plus 1, 3n plus 2, so every third one, starting with the second one, starting with the first one, starting with the third one, etc. Nth child is really good for precisely that. So I've got my star here, so the 5 points in the star. Basically, all this could have been copied and pasted, and the only thing different I needed to have was the transform for the rotate. Each one's going to have their own rotation. Okay, but I just copied and pasted the whole thing so you can see it. So, nth child is new, very nice. And then all these other things. So please read through these filters, transform, and transition. All right, the filters are pretty easy. Not much reading going on in there. The CSS Tricks website does a really good job of that. Always use that one. That's why I use that image. The transform and the transition are going to be the big kickers today, right? Because they're the powerhouses. The transition you're probably going to use the most, because without the transition, everything happens instantly. Sorry, that might have been a very loud snap on my microphone. Let me try this without the transition. Do the starburst, the star rotation. Sorry, I didn't get a starburst actually. The star rotation without the transition, which means that it's going to happen instantly. There it is. That may be the effect we're going for. In my case, of course, it wasn't, because if I were to do that, then I would teach you the transition. Definitely useful. You can do this just to position things along a radius and have them used as layout purposes. You can just rotate one so many degrees, move it over, rotate it back, and now it's there, just like I have done here. So you can have these things rotate out. And if you do this not on the hover, you just put these in place, this transform in place, they'll rotate into their positions immediately on page load. And then you can do a hover effect of each one, just like a general button kind of thing, like this one. Maybe not like that one, but you know what I mean, just a general button hover effect of some kind. So you can have them in place all the time, and then when you hover over each one and do a little thing, whatever you're going to do, and away you go with that. So transition, if you want it to take any length of time, right, which, unless you want it to be static, the transition is a nice way to go, even if you give it a really quick transition of 1/10 of a second versus a second, which I'm going to do with the star as well to kind of give you an idea of what that does. All right, so instead of 1,000 milliseconds, which is 1 second, I'm going to do 100 milliseconds, which is 1/10 of a second. All right, run that. So it was instant just a minute ago. Now it's going to be 1/10 of a second. So pretty quick. I didn't change the outgoing. The outgoing, let's make that 1/10 of half a second. So zoom and zoom. So pretty nice. It shows you the animation, right? But it's really quick. It's almost instant. It's better than instant, right? And it's better than slow, right? So 1/10 of a second. I'm actually going so fast, and I'm doing 5 of these images and I'm recording everything, so I'm having a little bit of my browser is having a little bit of an issue. My computer is fine. My browser, which I think I have a note in there, try not to be doing too many transforms and transitions and filters all at once. So I have 5 images doing 2 filters, 3 transforms, and all of them transitions at 100 milliseconds or 1/10 of a second, which, you know, our computers are pretty powerful, but our browsers aren't necessarily the right software to be running games in. And essentially I'm doing a little tiny little game thing right here. You could potentially, that's not the right thing to use for a game, but you can make some cool animations with this if you wanted to. And that's what I'm doing there. Try not to overload the browser with too much stuff going on all at once. All right, that is everything there. See the class announcement. I will have this updated and posted shortly on both Blackboard and on the class website. I'll also include some more information there. Keep a lookout for the next assignment, which I believe is to play around with this. Yes, I have an assignment to play around with this. It should be a fun assignment for you. And have that done. I will have some grades updated shortly. I'm in the process of doing that right now, but I got to get this out to you. Okay. If you have any questions, put them either on this video as comments or in the class discussion board. If you do have specific class related questions, don't post them on the video. I'm not allowed to share things like that publicly. If it's general information stuff, that's fine, but if it's like actual school stuff, do that privately through your school email, because school version of HIPAA. You know what I mean? I can't divulge that information, certainly not publicly, and not to your private emails either. Okay? So general questions for sure, put it here on the YouTube or on Blackboard. I don't really have a preference which one. It's whatever you want. If it's a YouTube one, I'll probably see the notification on my phone right away. If it's a Blackboard one, you'll have to wait till the next time I check Blackboard, which is probably not going to be more than once a day. But you'll still get it plenty of time for the next assignment if it's an assignment related question. Either way, the choice is yours. All right. Guys, have a great day.